Recording.
Now I can see myself.
Yeah, I think we'll Good evening, everybody, and welcome. This is ICCC Thursday Talks live on Facebook Live, and with us today we have a fantastic panel of people that are experts in the field of real estate, and we will be talking about COVID-19 and real estate. So we've had a huge following on Facebook over the last couple of weeks that we've had this Thursday Talks, and I'd like to welcome all our viewers that are, coming back and viewing this again. And those of you joining in for the first time, welcome to you as well, and hope to see you as we go along. So without further ado, we will go to more details about what we're going to be speaking about today. And COVID-19 on real estate has many dimensions. And as we probably put out there, and some of you read the teasers on social media, most Canadians have a large portion of their net worth connected to real estate. So this is very important for all of us. And this is very important, also for the future, because a lot of our net worth is dependent on this. So what are we going to talk about is how has the housing market been affected by COVID-19? What are the legal obligations for small business caught in COVID-19? Lockdown with respect to real estate deals. How long will this take for the market to revive? This is probably the million-dollar question. What will be the impact on mortgage rates? What are the regulatory implications on the sector? And to speak on this subject, we have a big group. It's a big group. We've got 4 people here, and Pramod Goyal. We will be starting off with Ajay Shah, who's a broker on record at Home Life Miracle Brokerage. We have Raman Dua, who's CEO, Director at Max Real Estates. We have David Musavi, General Counsel at Toronto Real Estate Board. And this is fantastic because David has an insider view on what is happening at the TREB. We also have Rob Trager, who is the co-founder and president of Walt Mortgage, and also the president of the Ontario Mortgage Association. And we have Pramod Goyal, who is the president of the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So all of these gentlemen will speak on this subject, and after which we will get to what we call a hard talk with Pramod Goyal, a question and answer session with Pramod Goyal, where he will ask questions to our panelists, and then we have a Q&A with the audience. So now I will go back to a slide, which is what we are also doing at the ICCC. We have started a thing called as the ICCC Small Business Assist Program. Now, what is this ICCC Small Business Assist Program? It essentially is one phone-in counseling of 30 minutes, because at the ICCC we have a lot of experts on different areas, on finance, accounting, technology. So if you're a small business and a member of the ICCC, and in this case not even a member of the ICCC, but want assistance, send us an email to iccc@icconline.org, and with the heading of Small Business Assist, and we will connect you to one of our volunteer experts, and we will give you guidance in that area. So that is the the ICCC Small Business Assist program. So now we will just run through a little disclaimer, because we live in an age where we need to just cover our legal aspects as well. The information provided by the ICCC at this webinar does not constitute legal, tax, or accounting advice, but is designed to provide general information relating to business and industry. By the panel members are their own personal opinion and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the ICCC. So, with that out of the way, we will now get to Ajay Shah, our first speaker. Ajay is a broker of record at Home Life Miracle Brokerage, and I will invite Ajay to speak now. Ajay, over to you.
Hi, Vijay bhai, everything. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Vijay bhai. I want to say thank you to Indo-Canada Chambers of Commerce giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my opinion. I've been in the business over 20 years and running the big brokerage. I get so many input in the market, and I want to give all our Indo-Canadians viewer that's the what's coming and what's happening. So my first thing is what's happening in market. Well, if you look at from the March 14th to the early full April month and the early May month is showing a kind of slowdown in real estate activities. Two way is affecting right now. One way is the prices are going down. Yes, prices are going down. If you look at the Toronto Real Estate Board have just released the data yesterday, and it shows that the price has been dropped down from last month to this month. Seasonal way is almost 10%, over 10%. Where number of listings, yes, number of listings are coming over there, but the potential buyer are not there. So at this time, there are some good opportunity also created for the people who want to really buy the home. From the many years, what used to happen, a first-time home buyer has no room to get into it. There was many bidding wars was happening. They cannot even have a chance to bargain. So many times they were putting the offer without seeing the property. All those things has been gone down dramatically. And is this time the first-time home buyer has a upper hand? Basically, no more, I will say, is a seller market. Basically, it's becoming the more and more towards the buyer market. And buyer is getting the more upper hand, and they are getting more kind of lubricative deals at this point. Real estate industry, yes, is a suffering, no doubt about it. If somebody says no, I will not gonna lie, yes, it is suffering. But end of the day, I have been gone through several recessions. In 91, I have gone through recession. Then 2000, when happened, recessions came. Then 2008, another recessions came. I have gone through all recessions, and I have seen one thing. But this recession and other recession has a one big difference, which a lot of people are not noticing it. If you look at in 91 recession, government was not giving any kind of assistance. Even September 11 happened and the recession came, mini recessions. That time government did not give any kind of help. In 2008, meltdown of USA, which one also affected Toronto and GTA market. No government provided any assistance. This is the first time in the history Canadian government has stood up with Canadian. They have pumped a lot of money. And because of this reason, the impact will not going to be so large what people are thinking. So since as long as the government with us, the impact not going to be there. So if somebody is saying that how long is going to last? Of course, there is no rocket science answer. But as you, Vijay Bhai, said, that yes, you can render your opinion. And I am just putting my opinion that this will last little longer, but it's not going to go for 5 years, 10 years, like what happened in between 90 to 97. It lasts for 7 years. No, it's not going to happen for 7 years. You may get the small window of opportunity to get some good deals in your pocket. Yes, that is a window is happening. If you look at, if some second question is come, is the bidding war is happening? Yes, there are some places bidding war still happening. If a seller has put the property in a reasonably very good price, and there is a low ticket pricing between 400 to 600 to 700, yes, demand is still there, and there is some places still the bidding war is happening. But yes, there is not crazy bidding war happening like where you used to see like a 60 offer or 50 offer, house used to sell for $150,000 up than asking price. No, that kind of bidding war is not there. Yes, if the price is right, there is a still bidding war. No doubt about it. Another thing I want to say, one good thing, interest rate. Right now, interest rate is 0.25% from 1.25%. That is also affecting a very good interest for the people who want to buy. Yes, the Canadian bank haven't reacted appropriately, reducing their 5-year and those mortgage rate. But yes, they have to come down eventually on their knee. Later point, right now they're saying that their risk is much higher. That's why the 5-year rate they are not reducing much. But yes, their rate is very, very low. Especially commercial rates, if you look at, is a very low than even last 3 to 4 years. So there are some commercial buyers who are looking for a good bargain. Yes, they have a good opportunity. Not even the residential market. Yes, there is a good opportunity for the interest rate. So interest rate in our side, yes, of course, it's our side. Will real estate market continue to do well? Questions everybody have is their mind. I think yes, real estate market will do continuously well. The reason is based on the demand and supply. Because of COVID virus, right now, the construction has already suffered. There are a lot of goods not coming from the China. And because of even the lot of people who are hoping that they're going to receive their home in the June, July, August, those closing also getting delayed. Also the condominium market, the new condo construction, who are hoping to get the closing in sometime in August, November, December, they are also not getting the closing because their apartment is not ready. So at this time, one side, the demand is low, and second, other side, the supply also getting low. At this time, the Canadian immigration also not allowing too many people in the country. So there is also demand of the housing market also slide down. But once everything will be go to normal way, hoping sometime in August, September, or October, whenever the government open up the borders and everything, again a lot of people will start coming to the Canada. Again, the housing market will be start getting healthier, and again the demand better. And because of that thing, housing market will perform well. Yes, it will perform well in coming years. Yes, impact of the COVID virus in the metro market, prices will be little bit low. But at the same time, I look at one thing in my life I have learned. That's when the prices go down, there are a lot of bargain hunter also who has a good money. They also come out in a market and they keep buying. So the buying will be continue and selling will be continue. Yes, you may not see there is a 50 showings in a 1 week. yes, but there will be a 10 showings, and out of 10, there will be a one good, serious buyer. You're going to pick it up. So end of that, you need a one potential buyer for each house. Which one you're going to get it? Yes, you will continuously get it. So questions will the market will do continue well? Yes, continue will be doing well. Will people will start planning to buy the homes? Yes, I think people are who haven't got a chance in early January, late December, or February when the bidding war, who couldn't able to get into the market. Yes, those are people are waiting right now. They are on their toe. They're just waiting. Some of the good opportunity comes, and they will definitely jump in the market, which one will also bring a lot of activities. At this time, due to government restriction, due to showing restriction, little bit scare in us from the buyer side as well as the little bit scare towards the seller side. There are a lot of people not putting the property in the market, or a lot of buyers are not coming out to see the property. That's why a pause had happened. But this pause will go continuously? Not really. I don't think this pause will go continuously. Yes, once it's open it up, yes, it's not going to be a crazy due market, but it will be balanced market compared to the buyer and sellers. It will be the most balanced market. Which one will be, I will say, Canada going to get a healthy correction. Which one we were hoping as a realtor from many, many years, and that's what we are happening. The investment opportunity. Is there any investment opportunity coming up? Of course, first of all, let me tell the COVID-19 has brought some good bargain price in the market. Person who has already bought the another house, their closing is coming up in August, and who has to sell this house right now in today's market, they will loosen up. They will also let it go some price, some money, and they will also sell it out their house. So for investment opportunity or from market opportunity, yes, it is there. Condo market, yes, it will continuously slide. There is a one reason, which one a lot of people don't know. Right now, because of the COVID situation, the short-term rental, basically we call Airbnb, which one also right now is a completely closed down.
Ajayji, one more minute. Ajayji, one more minute.
Sure, very good. And because of that thing, there will be a lot of people who cannot hang on those kind of property. They are selling up, and those are the things are coming up in the market. Another thing I want to talk about, commercial sectors. Yes, there is a big thing happening. If you are looking for a good bargain hunting properties, the hospitality sector is a very, very good. You should look into it. Right, most affected sector, if you look at this time, is the hotel and motel industry. A lot of hoteliers and motel owners cannot hang on too long. And due to this COVID virus, there are a lot of good opportunity will come over there. Also the land, if so many people thinking about buying the good land parcel or commercial parcel, there is a good opportunity over there. The plaza market also getting much better because the plaza price is going down. So the cap rate going up, rate of return also going very high. And that's where there is a big things are happening. So guys, if you are good people, look into that. You have a good opportunity in a commercial sectors, hotelier sector. Be a owner of a few hotels. I know what I'm going through, and hanging on there is not easy, my friend. So please watch this sector. Lots of money there.
Thank you very much, Ajayji. We will come back with questions, but hang in there. All of you on Facebook, if you have any questions for Ajay Shah, please send us in, and we will ask him those questions. So I think he's saying there is some pain, but there is also opportunities. And on that note, we will now go to Raman Dua. Raman is the CEO and Director at Save Max Real Estate, and Raman will be speaking about. Ramanji, I would like to say that you only have 5 minutes, so you've got a lot to speak about. But I think you've some of it on the slide right here. He's going to contribution real estate, so there's a bunch of things there. So over to you, Ramanji.
Thank you, Vijay. First of all, a warm welcome to all the viewers for this discussion, and it's really my pleasure, and I'm really humbled and honored to be part of this esteemed group of all the panelists as well as all the office bearers of ICCC, including Mr. Pramod, who is the president of ICCC. And there are so many learned people sitting over here, so it's my pleasure to put my 2 cents over there. First of all, I will take you to the little bit stats, like how real estate makes an impact on Canadian economy in general. So if I look at the number, total GDP for Canada is approximately 1.99 trillion, and real estate is one of the biggest chunk. There's a 256 billion GDP contribution is done by the real estate transactions, either that is sale purchase or it is the lease transaction. So this is the topmost contributor towards total GDP, which is followed by the second sector, which is manufacturing, where it contributes approximately 199 billion dollars. Now, if I look at these stats, it really shows how important real estate market is for the Canadian GDP. Now, 76% of Canadian wealth is wrapped up in the real estate sector, which really is, I would say, one almost like a major chunk of the wealth which has been come up into the real estate sector. More than half of the Canada's GDP gained from real estate transactions in 2019. So all these statistics clearly gives an indication of the importance of real estate market. Now, during this COVID-19, I know it's a very challenging time, and I hope everybody is staying safe with their families. The first and foremost question comes into everybody's mind is why real estate is considered as an essential service. Because when Ford government was announcing the essential services, this was the biggest question out there. Now try to understand, just review the statistics. On an average, if I just take all across GTA, Toronto Real Estate Board, approximately 8 to 10,000 houses get sold every year. If I look at the stats in the month of March and April, they were almost close to, I would say, more than 10,000 closing were happening. If real estate industry, if the real estate sector is not working, just imagine what is going to happen to those 10,000 households, those 10,000 buyers and sellers. There is going to be a lot of lawsuits happening out there into the market if the transactions are not being closed. There is going to be a lot of challenges with the families because they have to move from one house to other house. So these are clear-cut indications why real estate is considered as an essential service out there into the market. And I think that was one of a wonderful decision. But again, I would like to congratulate all the realtor fraternity, all the brokerages, all the companies out there. They were very thoughtful about their client safety as well as making sure the transactions were closing on time so that there are no legal obligations, there are no legal complications either to buyer or to the sellers. Now, another big question coming up into the market during COVID-19, how real estate is working. Vijay, I would request you to go to the previous slide, please. Okay. So if I look at the stats in April 2019 and April 2020, you can see there are close to 9,000 transactions happened in 2019, whereas only 2,975 transactions happened, which is 67% less. But how relevant that data is. Now, I will correlate it with a wonderful example. So this is what we are talking about, that you're asking me a score of the match, whereas the match is not even happening because the teams are not on the ground. It's raining right now in the ground. It's raining right now in the field. So neither the buyers are in the market nor the sellers are in the market because there are so many restrictions which are going through. And of course, that restrictions is because of the safety and security of the buyers and sellers. In spite of those restrictions, 3,000 transactions happened, which clearly shows the strength of the real estate market right now. It means market has no technical issues. It is only that we are not getting the fair ground to play. Now, if I come on to the price as compared to last year, April 2019, and this year, the prices have still gone up by 0.1%. So in other words, the prices are still stable. So it is just the number of transactions which are being affected. And the simple reason behind that is because there is no activity, there are so many restrictions. Now, the most important question comes when we assess the real estate market or we try to predict the real estate market, that majority of the time happens based on the demand and supply. Now, if I look at the supply right now in the market, there are only 6,174 houses available on the Toronto Real Estate Board, which is one of the largest board all across Canada. Now, on an average, 7 to 8,000 transaction happens. Even if I look at the February or March statistics, we are sitting less than 1 month inventory. Now, you can very well understand the situation with that, that if it is 1 month inventory, right now it is technically a seller's market, because that is how we determine the buyer and seller market. Um, in a general opinion, 3 month inventory in the market is considered as a balanced market for buyers and sellers. If the inventory goes to 4 months, then it is called as a buyer's market. And if inventory goes to 5 months, it is a clear-cut indication of a recession. Whereas right now we are just sitting on less than 1 month inventory, which really gives a wonderful indication that market is going to behave very properly once this COVID-19 gets over. Now, of course, everybody understands it's an uncertain situation and nobody has a crystal ball to determine when this COVID-19 will get over. So now let's talk about two scenarios. First scenario, this COVID-19 stays for a short term, which is 2 to 4 more weeks, and situations are getting better. If that happens, the only fear which I have in my mind is it might shoot up the market in upward direction so badly that once again it will create a lot of multiple offer situations. And the simple reason behind that is we are short of inventory. We are just sitting on less than 1 month inventory. Now, 2019 overall stats, there was close to 87,000 houses got sold, which gives me an average of approximately little more than 7,000 houses get sold every month on Toronto Real Estate Board. And there was average sold price, which was 819,000. Now, if I look at active listings right now in the market, which is 10,561, it is down by approximately 41.4% as compared to 2019. This again gives a strength to my logic that we are sitting very low in inventory. If by chance, if fortunately, and we would all pray to God that this happens next 2 to 4 weeks, COVID-19 gets over, definitely we are going to see a very, very strong seller's market. And that will be fueled by some other factors, low rate of interest. Of course, as I explained earlier, real estate is definitely one of the most contributing factor in Canadian GDP. So there is going to be a lot of attention. Either it is the residential market or it is the commercial market.
So Ramanji, we'll have to put a stop to that right now. So we will get some questions for you as we go along. So we will move to our next speaker. We're very proud to say we've got David Musavi, who's the General Counsel for the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, and somebody that's been seeing this unfold. The whole market unfold, the implications of legal aspects. What do we do? So David, welcome, and we'd like to hear your view on how you've been seeing this happen, and your view on the real estate sector.
Well, thank you very much, Vijay, and for the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce for the invite. It's a pleasure to sort of be here and to be involved with you guys and learn a bit about what you guys like to do, and I think this is a fantastic initiative. Bit of background about myself. I am the General Counsel at the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, and I oversee the legal matters for the board as well as the professional development and arbitration and professional standards departments for the board, and in matters that are sort of impacting all the members. I want to give a bit of a timeline as to how things have unfolded and how that has had an impact from a legal perspective on the way business is conducted in the province. So if you look at the brief timeline here, on March 12th, the Ontario government announced that all publicly funded schools will be closed for a couple weeks following the March break in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, by March 17th, the province declared a state of emergency. So only about five days after that. That created a bit of confusion in the marketplace. What did that mean in terms of realtors doing their jobs? Does that mean that they can continue showing properties? Does that mean they can continue doing open houses? how do they appropriately market the properties, for example, for their seller clients, and alternatively, how do they show the properties to their buyer clients if they're acting for buyers? There was a lot of confusion at that point about what that meant. On March 23rd, the Premier, he ordered a closure of all non-essential businesses for 14 days, and so did the Mayor of Toronto as well. And we had that state of emergency that was declared in the city. So the question was, what's a non-essential business? Well, we looked at the list that was provided, I believe it was that evening, late that evening, the regulations. And as was noted by our esteemed panelists prior to me speaking, real estate and the services of real estate were deemed to be essential services. And for the good reasons that were outlined before. I mean, housing is a critical right for every human, and people need to be able to identify where they're going to live and provide shelter for their family. So it makes sense. And all of the different professions that come around that would also obviously include realtors, in some cases, moving services for people who needed to move or come and go. But there, at that point, there still remain questions around what are we going to do about open houses? What are we going to do about virtual showings? And there was some confusion there. At TREB, we did our best to get further details from the government to have them expand on that. It wasn't clear. We didn't know precisely what they meant by that and whether or not those activities had to stop or they could continue. But in the marketplace, the issues were abound. You had, for example, buyers saying, well, hold on a second, I want to go take a look at a property, but someone saying, sorry, it's not available to look at right now. The seller doesn't want to actually make that available. On the flip side, you had sellers saying, well, hold on a second, I don't know if I want to continue doing this. Is it appropriate? And some realtors amongst themselves would have this debate. They would say, well, what should we do? Do we stop doing our business? Do we continue doing our business? We've been given social distancing directives to stop being close to each other, to stop unnecessary contact. And what does that mean? Do we continue our business or do we not? And so there was a lot of confusion there in the marketplace for that. And then on April 3rd, the list was extended in terms of non-essential businesses. And at that point, we had been given direction that open houses were in fact going to be banned. Okay, so that was very clear as of April 4th, open houses would be banned. Now, let's think about why real estate transactions are critical at this time. Well, for starters, there could be, for example, prior to the pandemic, there could have been a family that just sold their home and they had a closing date that was going to be anywhere from, let's just say, 2 to 3 months down the road. And they were going to spend that time looking for their next home and to figure out where they're going to purchase and move on. Now, if the entire marketplace had shut down, the real estate marketplace had shut down, what would happen to those families? They'd be stuck in between a closing and not being given the opportunity to find a new home. In terms of the transactions from a legal perspective, a lot of this did sort of impact things, but we've had laws in Ontario for some time that have allowed for example, the signing of electronic documents as it relates to real estate. We've also had electronic registration of documents as it relates to conveyance of properties. So we've had the infrastructure in place to carry out these transactions online for some time. So a lot of the parties that I'm familiar with, they seem to handle these closings quite well. It didn't impact a lot of things, the deals that were in place. There might have been some extensions that needed to happen for maybe appraisals or conditions to be met. But overall, there wasn't a significant uptick from what I could personally anecdotally see of people complaining about. But again, to be fair, I don't practice real estate law in that context. Now that open houses are banned, TREB had to find a way to help our members. And one of the ways that we did that is we started providing free virtual learning for how to conduct a virtual showing. We had to provide tools, we had to provide examples of ways that our members could operate in this context and function with what would happen. So the question is now, we talked about what happens with real estate transactions that were not yet closed, and what will real estate look like as we go forward? Well, I'll give you an anecdotal example. I was at the grocery store the other day, and I saw plexiglass that was installed between myself and the cashier. I also saw plexiglass that was installed between each of the separate self-checkout kiosks. And I thought to myself, wow, that looks like it's probably going to be a permanent change. It's a way that our world will change in some way, shape, or form permanently for the foreseeable future. And so when it comes to showing homes, it'll be the same thing. There will be a lot more emphasis on virtual showings, less emphasis on open houses, of course, until that ban is lifted. But even then, I think there will be innovative ways to get around it. couple more points I'll make very quickly. Condos, many condos themselves have just banned outright showings because they don't want to allow people to come into the building, perhaps, God willing, not spread any further viruses. And of course, tenants in this context have also been caught in the middle. If you're a tenant and your landlord wants to show your property to a prospective tenant, you're under the law obligated to do so. But in this context, evictions have been banned. And so what does a tenant do when they say, listen, I don't feel comfortable with people coming into my home for the landlord to show it to them? And so there's a lot of these issues that are still going. They're still ongoing. They'll need to be resolved, but they exist now. I'm going to close with that comment there. But I will say one more thing on a personal note. This pandemic's been quite eye-opening. I for one, had an injury, had a concussion some time ago. And it's, I think this experience has taught for me the importance of making sure everybody stays healthy in this time with your mental health and getting out there, getting fresh exercise. So I'll leave it at that. I hope you guys are staying healthy and safe.
Thank you very much, David. And please stay. We have questions coming in. So we would like you to I already see some questions that can be addressed by you. So please hang in there. And thank you very much for also, sharing some personal, personal experiences as well. So our next speaker is Rob Trager. Rob is the chair of the Ontario Mortgage Investment Corporation Association. So he's got a different perspective as all our other speakers. His perspective is about money. He's lending people money to buy houses. Rob is also the co-founder and president of Vault Mortgage Corporation and a board member of the Private Capital Markets Association. So Rob's got a lot to do with giving money to people. So Rob, we'd like to hear your perspective of how your money is doing, and what are the risks. What if you're in the market? Is this a good time, bad time from a mortgage perspective? So over to you, Rob.
Thank you, and if you could please, perfect. So first off, thank you to ICCC for having me here to speak. I started and I run one of Ontario's largest private mortgage lenders. We do residential first and second mortgages as well as commercial and construction. I'm not saying that to plug my company. I'm just trying to give you an idea of my background, to give you some perspective as to my vantage point as to what I'm seeing out there. And to tell you what I'm seeing out there right now, if you could go back to the, perfect. If you could go back, it's somewhat confusing because I'm not sure if we have a resilient economy or just a government who with an ATM mentality. Between the amount of deferral programs and subsidies that are going on out there, I mean, I saw one today where literally our government is now giving money to employed people to give them even more money. Banks are giving deferral programs on an as needs basis, but from what I've heard, they've been pretty lax in understanding. 10% of CMHC's entire portfolio, we're talking billions, are under deferral programs. And private mortgage lenders' portfolios have performed better in April and May than they did in January and February. I'm pausing for dramatic effect there, but think about that for a second. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Our economy has halted, and our portfolios, my portfolio is 97% current. It's doing better now in the middle of all of this than it did back in January and February. We'll call those normal times. So where that's kind of given me some pause is, on one hand, I'm happy that the book's paying and my cohorts portfolios are also performing. But on the other hand is I don't know how well my borrowers are actually doing. I'm not so sure how things are really going to look once these subsidy programs roll off, whether it's the CERB where people are getting the $2,000, or even the wage subsidy where employers are covering, where the government's covering 75% of wages. I'm sure there's lots of people that are being who maintain their employment because at a cost of 25% to the employer, they can make an economic decision to do so. So that's really what I'm waiting to see what happens. And my overall thoughts on how this is going to impact, I think commercial is going to feel a bigger brunt of this than residential. In particular, retail, which was struggling to begin with e-commerce coming in. This could be a big kind of have further compression on that sector. Office, I think what's going to be very interesting to look at for the office space is we've all figured out how to work remotely. We figured out hoteling. I mean, you've taken whole companies and you've displaced them in the matter of weeks. And whether it's Zoom or laptops or whatnot, or even conferences like this, phenomenal how we can kind of all gather. And although it'd be better to be in one room, we're still able to share our messages. But I think people that are either renting or owning office are going to look at how much space they need differently, because by and large, I think we've proven that we could work somewhat well in a fragmented way. So this makes it difficult for lenders to underwrite. And it's not just private lenders; it's also lenders across the spectrum, from the banks to the privates in the mix. There's definitely more focus on borrowers' covenants. They want credit quality, stability of cash flow, but they're looking at those two historical measures differently, because there's kind of a demarcation between pre-COVID, call it normal, and now, where it's difficult to figure out or to use historical markers to accurately predict to the same extent. And obviously, there's a lot more focus on the industry of employment of the individual. So somebody in hotels are being treated a little bit differently than somebody that might be in the grocery world or e-commerce. So we're seeing lenders pull back their loan to values. There's more scrutiny being placed on refinances and equity takeouts. And even some banks have stopped HELOCs, because you have to remember, from the lender's point of view, they have to commit to that money. And with so much uncertainty out there, they don't want to clog up their balance sheets with all of these promises to provide money. All that being said, I fundamentally believe in the GTA real estate market and its long-term resilience. But I think in trying to figure out the strength of it, we really have to follow the epidemiology and not the financial markets. Because, this whole thing is related to the coronavirus. So if we want to know how healthy our economy is, that's what we should be following. And I think with record low interest rates, I mean, they're low. They're not as record as they used to be, but it doesn't matter. I mean, they go up by 5-10 basis points. It's minuscule. And anyone that can't buy a house because interest rates are up by 10-15 basis points shouldn't buy a house. So between record low interest rates and deferral and subsidy programs, that should really help to stabilize short-term values. Remember, if the banks, who are providing the vast majority of the debt out there, are giving deferral programs, that's going to take a lot of pressure off of home buyers from becoming stressed in trying to sell their houses. And where I think the pre-existing lack of supply, and then as immigration slowly opens up, that will kind of aid to a long-term value recuperation. And eventually, lenders who are tightening their lines will loosen up with them. So my overall conclusion is values are going to go down. Lenders are going to get tighter, but this is all short-term. So now is a great time, especially with low interest rates, work with your mortgage broker, lock in with your rates, lock in with your firm pre-approvals, and then buy into the dip and then wait it on the outside. And I think what everyone really has to, as you talk more about some of the financial implications and its implications on the real estate market, we can't ignore that the government is saving us to a level that I didn't think that they would. And then we have to ask ourselves, what's going to happen when that rolls off and we're facing kind of the record unemployment that we think we're facing? Or a better question is, will the government even, stop spending? And then what is the long-term implications to our economy with rising debt levels and inflation? I hope I stay within my 5 minutes, and thank you, ICCC, and I'm looking forward to the question period.
Thank you very much, Rob. I think that's a lot of food for thought there. And again, if you're going to remember something, rebound should follow epidemiology, not financial markets. So we will take that from you, Rob. Now over to Pramod G. Pramod Goyal is the President and CEO of Canada-wide Financial Corporation and also the President and Board Chair of the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So Pramod will talk on behalf of the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce, give a few viewpoints that we as the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce think about real estate and COVID-19, and also some of his personal views. So over to you, Pramod. And for those of you viewing on Facebook, we were kind of going to be, doing this for an hour, but we're going to take an extra 15 minutes because those of you in the panel probably did not know this. We kind of did it very smoothly, but we did have an outage on Facebook for the initial few minutes. So we will be going a little over time. So over to you, Pramodji.
Thank you, Vijay. A very good afternoon to all the audience, ladies and gentlemen. So after we have heard from all the real estate industry experts, let's have a broader look on the macroeconomic perspective of where we are, where the industry is. So as Ramanji was earlier alluding, real estate is, of course, Canada's largest contributor for the GDP and almost accounting for about 15% of the output. In fact, just the single most largest component. And if you look at the past trends of the real estate industry or the housing market, what we see is for the last 2 decades, the mortgage rates since that they slided in 1990, since then, there has been a continuous rise in the housing market. The prices have been going up. The market has been very stable. And especially if we were to mention the biggest 2 housing markets in Canada, Toronto and Vancouver, hasn't had any correction in the last several years. I mean, the prices have been non-checked. But on the other hand, if we look at what is the other factual position that we cannot ignore is that Canadians still owe about $2.3 trillion in debt. And this is the consumer debt alone, which we're talking about. That includes significant portion out of mortgages, which is almost equal to the country's GDP. And of course, by any standard, is much higher than ratio than what US had earlier when the housing market collapsed there. So this is the perspective that you can look at just for comparative purpose. But what is happening currently with the COVID-19 pandemic? So if we look at historically with the market, the housing market especially has been, the strongest pillars have been the robust labor market and the immigration, continuous and steady immigration that the Canadian economy has offered to foreigners. I mean, in the last few years, we look at, I think over 300,000 immigrants are coming in. So of course that contributes to a bigger factor to the price and the demand in terms of housing. Now the current situation, the latest numbers that I have, about 11 million Canadians have applied for income support as a result of have already been cleared and paid over $28 billion by the government. It's a massive outflow of government funds. And that probably answers some of the questions that Rob was also addressing. That is keeping afloat the private mortgages and the housing market, that there is not much of delinquency that we see as of now. Added to that, we also see that lenders, or primarily the big banks, they've deferred almost 670,000 mortgages, which constitute about 14% of the big 13 lenders' home book as of April 16. So I don't have numbers after that, so I'm sure the number might have gone up. So that shows again the impact that it has on the viability and sustainability of several of these mortgages, in spite of that huge cash outflow that the government has. Another factor that could play a role in times to come is the immigration targets. I mean, normally, as I was saying earlier, so the government normally has about 300,000 plus immigrants coming in every year. Now, with all this pandemic situation, travel restrictions, which are hopefully going to continue for next several weeks or months, there would be a significant drop in immigration number that could also possibly have its impact. And to add to this, again, another 3 million Canadians that we see have either lost a job after March 15th and or had reduced work hours. So again, an area of concern from a housing market, if we look at, is to how many people would be able to sustain or go for mortgages. So that's the backdrop. Now looking at what's next, what it can be looked at. So according to Veritas research, only if say 2% of the housing stock were to be listed for sale, it would trigger the kind of supply shock behind the 1990 crash. And I don't think that that will happen. But again, I mean, that is a possible situation because as my other fellow panelists were alluding earlier, and they had mentioned all the good reasons why we see a significantly low inventory. But given the dynamics and the situation with all the backdrop, there could be likely an overflow of listings, which are all held up because of the restrictions and the lack of confidence in the market. But when the market resumes, we could see an overflow of listings. So that could, in a way, dictate the pricing of the market. Now, again, I mean, what could be the recovery concerns? I mean, like trajectory of COVID-19 cases, of course, would dictate as to what the timing we are looking at for recovery. As of now, it is stable, but we don't know. I mean, we are hearing about second and third waves coming. Current situation is unforeseen and unprecedented. Of course, it's not driven by traditional economic drivers, as Rob also mentioned earlier. Recovery, of course, is going to be slow, though consumers will want to quickly return to marketplace. I mean, whether it is going to the restaurants or shopping or, in fact, for home buying. And to enable swift recovery, the government has all the machinery in. Bank of Canada, of course, is playing a vital role, will be holding firm the rates that we see until recovery. So rates are historically very low, variable rates are almost flat, and fixed term rates are also pretty low. Even I would say long-term rates as of now, if somebody is able to lock in, I mean, they are seemingly pretty nice. But just to quickly go through what I feel could be the impediments to real estate recovery, that is not just the Canadian economy, but it's the global economy that has been hit. So that could have a major impact. We see large-scale employment, as I mentioned. Reduced credit availability or tightening by the lenders in terms of qualifying criteria. We have started to see that. And of course, I mean, that will be relaxed, as Rob said, I mean, in months or next year to come. But I think in the short term, we would see that. Drop in immigration numbers contribute. Of course, the other factor that some of you would agree that we have seen in Canada is a lot of foreign investment that comes into the real estate and housing sector, especially if we talk about metros, huge. And that's why it's keeping the Toronto and Vancouver markets buoyant. But I think now what we've seen in the drop of numbers, even Vancouver, I was reading somewhere, that almost 60% of the people in Vancouver, house owners, have not been able to pay their property taxes. I mean, they're huge because of the prices. And one other critical factor that I would like to mention here, of course, there could be a tremendous impact on investment properties, especially because people who own now 2, 3, 4 properties, and especially investment owners who are drawing their income from travel industry, short-term rental accommodations, likes of Airbnb, that has been greatly hampered. So it could have an impact, and it will be difficult for these kind of people who own multiple properties to carry their mortgages, and it could be longer in terms of where the effect is. Of course, I mean, all other messages that I keep reading. I mean, I was reading CMSC article yesterday, statement that says real estate prices won't return to pre-recession levels until late 2022. GTA sales plunged 67% in April. Of course, I mean, these are temporary, but it is a number that we cannot ignore. I personally feel that the housing activity could see a major pullback this year. Even though, I mean, everybody's optimistic and I personally want to be optimistic, but I think that's a fact that we cannot ignore. But surely and certainly it is expected to rebound in 2021. Some of the experts are even leading that the sales drops could be up to 30% in the current year. In the wake of physical distancing, as others mentioned, and the lack of physical infrastructure for open houses, even though some of them have started to do virtual tours and all that, and of course the eroded consumer confidence. However, I mean, I would conclude with saying that continued low rates of interest, a bounce in immigration back once the market or the travel restrictions go off, and the strength returning to the job market maybe later part of this year, the pent-up demand could help the sales surge perhaps towards the end of this year, but otherwise definitely in 2021.
So thank you very much, Pramodji. So Pramodji, the next session is also you. So we'll move to the section where we call it Hard Talk with Pramod Goyal. So Pramodji, those were, I think, very good views, and I think you've got hard facts and statistics to back those up. And I think we're looking forward to a few questions that you might have for our panelists as well. So again, back to you, Pramodji.
Sure. Thank you, Vijay. Let me ask first to Ramanji. As I was also mentioning, and all the experts in the real estate industry are predicting a drop in residential sales price due to all the factors that I also mentioned, higher unemployment, slowdown in tourism, numbers of immigration going down, impact on short-term rental business, all that. So despite the market uncertainty, there are still a lot of people or segments of people who would need to buy or sell right now for various reasons. So what do you see actually happening on the ground? Because you run a large brokerage and you interact with agents, brokers, and of course the consumers at large. So what do you see practically happening?
Well, if you look at right now, the way the market is going, there is an activity. I see right now our brokerage are still selling the homes. Yes, we are not selling the large number of homes we used to, but the sales are dropped, yes, but still the sales are, we are doing approximately 25% capacity. And last month I was just running the data yesterday. That's what's happening in the market, how much showing is happening. People getting used to with the new system. Every time the change comes, it's a little bit hard, but people are changing with the new system. A lot of people have bought the house without seeing, only on a virtual tour with the clause. After they have 5 days to go and physically see, and they can continue with the offer or get out. So that's the way also few houses are selling. So yes, it is happening, but market is still running.
Okay. David, I mean, let me ask you this. I mean, we all hear about a force majeure clause, and we see that mostly in commercial contracts in majority of the cases. If you could briefly share your opinion as to what steps should tenants take if they could or they want to use these provisions, especially in the commercial context. I mean, of course, I mean, it could be applicable in residential tenancy as well. So do you see anything specific, any trend in particular?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. For the benefit of everyone, the force majeure clause refers to, it's a French term, it's a French and English term, force majeure, meaning that there's a major incident of sorts that's sort of unexpected and perhaps out of the reasonable expectation of the parties. There's been a lot of legal commentary over the last number of weeks over force majeure clauses because it's rare that they get invoked. Usually it has to do with some sort of state of emergency or a fire in the building or something that would in some way, shape, or form restrict access and use of the property. Every force majeure clause, like every other clause, is different. Some of them are quite expansive in their definition. Some of them are very clear about what qualifies as a force majeure event. For example, I've seen some force majeure clauses that will say things like fire, insurrection, war, electrical hazards, et cetera, but they didn't actually identify specifically a viral pandemic or anything to that effect. In those cases, there's a lot of argument that goes back and forth. Keep in mind that usually somebody that's invoking a force majeure clause, it's not always the case that both parties would be in agreement that that should be invoked. Perhaps it restricts that individual's or excuses them, or at least one party is looking for an excuse to not carry out a particular obligation. Some force majeure clauses will be very broadly worded, and they'll say something like, or any other act of God, or any other act that is completely beyond the scope and reach of the parties to either foreseen or to any way, shape, or form to deal with. Again, so it's important to look at what the force majeure clause says. And even then, some of them that I've seen will actually, they'll set out that these are all the things that would be a force majeure, and they'll excuse you from certain performances, perhaps, or they, in some cases they'll say, but it doesn't excuse you from any payment obligations in this agreement. So I've seen those instances as well. And in those cases, if the clause is quite clear that the payment still must happen, then it must happen. What it might do is, for example, say certain obligations do not need to be performed. So for example, you own a property and a property manager has to shovel the snow or to keep the area clean, and maybe there's a fire in the building and people are told they can no longer enter the building. Well, in that case, that obligation to perform that is obviously not required, and they have an excuse. But if that same clause says that you have to still pay your rent, there's very little opportunity to get away from that, unless, of course, banks and financial institutions are closed. So it's a case-by-case basis. I think what I've seen, or at least read about quite a bit, is that it's interesting how a lot of landlords, in some cases, and tenants have done what they can to work with each other. I mean, yeah, there's a force majeure clause. Yeah, rent is due, but I mean, the whole world is kind of upside down right now. How do we work together? In some cases, you get landlords and tenants that can make that happen. In some cases, you may not. The residential question is interesting. I should say that even though the government has closed the tribunals that were responsible for, the landlord tribunal is responsible for giving out eviction orders, that doesn't in any way, shape, or form excuse any tenant from paying their rent. Rent is still due, and if they can't pay it, even though they can't be evicted, it'll all be due almost frankly immediately as it's due normally, but the expectation of it being paid in arrears is almost immediately when the state of emergency is lifted. And so in those cases, landlords that wanted to seek relief from their tenants not paying their rent would have to go to the landlord tenant board like they normally have and put in their N4 notice, or I can't remember, N4 and N9 notice, and say, listen, you've been given notice to eviction, and they'll go through the process. Some commentary that I've read is that even though the landlord tenant board is closed, if you're a landlord in that situation, submit your N4 notice anyways and just get in the queue and be prepared.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Rob, if I can ask you, there's a specific pertaining to real estate development. And of course, because of the pandemic restrictions, all those constructions were hampered, disturbed. And as we know, the revenue on the project is based on basically booked on project completion on time, and there are several factors that go in. And now, because of the marketing inability of the projects that are underway, because public showrooms would have been closed, or people were not very keen on, going in for new investments. And I've also heard and read that in some cases, existing investors might be thinking of or have pulled out of current projects. So since you're also involved with the Mortgage Investment Corporations Association, what's your personal opinion? Do you actually see those kind of instances happening in the last few months, or you see that a possibility?
That's a possibility on some of the smaller and less in projects that are not as well capitalized. They're really feeling the brunt of it now. there's a lot of like, I was talking to people like Menkes and Tridel, and the real estate market has been strong for so long that they've built such large war chests of capital that they know that they are going to go through a slowdown now, whether it's involved with buyers going to the sidelines, or in some of the cases, even though that social distancing has impacted people's ability to actually construct, at least on the smaller projects, some of them are still doing it. They are eventually going to get caught by the fact that the supplies that they need, they're just not going to have access to. So some of them are getting tripped up now on the capital side, whereas other projects are going to get tripped up just on the supply side. They have to go get their finishes. Yeah, it's great that Home Depot is open, but if you're building a $2 to $3 million house, you're not going to furnish it with Home Depot style finishes. And the high-end fixture store and the high-end tile store, they're either closed down or their supply chain is so disrupted, because you properly pointed out that this is a global pandemic, and with the advent of the internet and cheap flights and everything prior to this, we were such an interconnected global economy. And I think as the months kind of play out, we're really going to see how intricate that whole web is.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Just one last question, Vijay. I know we are stretching for time, so I just one question that I cannot resist asking Rob again. I'm just looking at or assessing, trying to assess the impact of the pandemic on investment capital, and as to where you guys or investment capitalists they would focus on. I mean, as a result of this, whether there is less of an interest now in putting the money, or they would be focused more on opportunistic sourcing or a strategic acquisition, or continue as normal. What do you foresee?
Most of it's gone to the sidelines, actually. We're fortunate because we have institutional capital and it's a little bit stickier. But when you talk about the retail capital, the individual investor, a lot of it's gone to the sidelines for two main reasons. Number one, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty out there. And the second reason is the phenomenal opportunities haven't presented themselves yet. We're not like, look at Warren Buffett. I mean, I'm extrapolating a little bit. Warren hasn't bought in a thing, and it was just an interesting article where he said, where Charlie Munger, his right-hand man, said, there's nothing to buy. There's no opportunities to buy, because the real implications of what's happened hasn't really hit Main Street. And as I mentioned before, even if it has, we're just being so propped up by the government. We're all kind of working on this house of cards, and when it does come down, because they can't keep printing money, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of some existing investors are going to get hurt, and some of the what I think are the more cunning investors are going to kind of swoop in and pick up some phenomenal opportunities. And that's why we're building a war chest at Vault, because we do think that those opportunities will present themselves.
Sure. Thank you very much, Rob. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Over to Vijay. Let's have some questions from the audience. I see tons of those coming in, so please go ahead.
Yes. So thank you very much, Pramod, and the panelists there. So we have a couple of questions. I think a lot of them, seem to be. I'll go quickly to Ramanji. I think Ramandua. The one question here is, if you are a new buyer, first-time buyer, is this the time to jump in, or is this the time to wait? What does a first-time buyer do?
Vijay, it's a situation like, where it is a bear and bull situation. Like somebody thinks like a bear, somebody thinks like a bull. But I'm always bullish to the real estate market, to be very frank, and looking into all the factors which are actually playing an important role. Like either it is the inventory or it is the consumer sentiment, even like as Ajay was mentioning about like how the market is behaving on the ground level. Let me just give you a little bit insight. I could see there are a lot of excitement happening into the buyers, because they want to take an advantage of this situation. because right now only serious sellers are out into the market. You can very well imagine who is going to put his house on the market on this market only if they need to sell it. So of course this is a good time for buyers to go and grab those deals, especially rate of interest are in your favor. So if you are a deal hunter, I would strongly recommend you, this is the time to go out into the market. My strong prediction, as I said, if everything goes fine in another 2 to 4 weeks, this market is going to be totally out of control, to be very frank.
So there's two ways, as you said, there's a bull and bear scenario on this. As you said, if there's not enough inventory, that means there's not enough supply and more demand, it could go up. The counter could also be true, where there's, as Pramodji mentioned, if more than 2% of people put their houses on sale, then it could trigger increase in supply as well. So we leave that to the people to take a decision on. Let me go to Ajesh, Mr. Shah here. Mr. Shah, a question for you. Pre-construction condos, it was probably the easiest way to make money in the GTA, right? You just put in money on a condo, and it was sure shot lottery that most people that played that game. Is it going to continue? And those people who are already invested, what do they do?
Well, let me tell you one thing. The condo market continuously will do very well, because that's the only small ticket available for the first-time home buyer. The way the immigration going to come in, the way the demand of the housing going to grow, and the prices are right now what the level right now. Who can buy? Where you want to buy something in a $400,000? You can still have so many condominium, including you can go to the surrounding GTA, even the Waterloo or Kitchener or all those things. Yes, so people who have bought the condo and closing coming up after 2 years, don't worry about it. Stay tight. Market will rebound. You will still make money.
Okay. And what about people considering, should they jump in right now? Pre-construction, I still see ads coming up. There are people who are still selling condos, pre-construction condos during COVID-19. So is that, what do you suggest to them?
Well, right now you can still, there are some condos are in a good price. Some of the builder have corrected their price. Some of the builder who has last inventory sitting in their table, they want to dispose it. Those are the one very good opportunity to grab it.
Okay. So basically buyers go negotiate, try to get the better deal. So there is deals out there,
Yes.
but you probably need to ask for it. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So we have a couple of other questions. So there's a lot of questions are around banks. Okay. So a lot of these questions are: is the stress test going to be relaxed? Okay. Will the banks loosen mortgage approval criteria for renewals? So Rob, this is I'll send this over to you. So what do you think?
Both very good questions. I don't think so. I mean, if anything, if you think about the stress test, that was to ensure that people's income is able to support their mortgage. And what we're seeing here now is that, people's ability to earn an income has never been more tested. As much as CMHC and who bought about $50 billion of asset-backed securities from the banks to free up banks' balance sheets, with such low interest rates, a lot of banks have actually increased their interest rates a little bit lately because they feel like they haven't been able to properly price this risk. So I just can't see with OSFI, who has to make sure and protect the financial institutions, I can't see them allowing in an environment like this, them relaxing the lenders' lending guidelines. There's just too much uncertainty to it. And that's where some privates can come in and fill the void, but definitely can't fill the void to the same extent of the banks. They're doing billions and billions and billions of originations a quarter. But I think the banks are going to tighten up in this for the short period of time until they get better visibility. And I think the market's going to go down before it goes up. And I think we're going to see even further tightening from the banks, which is why I said before, Now is a good time to go, and we don't even provide institutional financing, but now is the time to go and get locked in with your institutional financing and putting yourself in a position to buy when the market goes down, because nothing can go up forever. This market's been on a tear for, the longest bull run we've ever seen. And it'd be very interesting to see how it can withstand such a large and systemic shock to its system. When they introduced the foreign buyers tax, for instance, which is minute in terms of its implications compared to the economy grinding to the halt, certain pockets of the GTA market fell by 20%. That's GTA detached houses. So once again, follow the epidemiology, follow the government subsidy programs, because epidemiology is going to give you an idea of when this economy should be able to get into a position of normalizing, and the government subsidy program is going to tell you how long we could kind of keep putting a band-aid over what could be the largest recession in since the Great Depression.
So thanks a lot, Rob. I think that's a fantastic answer there, and that was what I was thinking as well. Is if anything, they're going to tighten this. It's not going to loosen it, because they want to make sure they're giving their money to people that can return the money back. So I think there's another question here, which was about now, just in case, if it goes as Mr. Raman Kua mentioned, and there's going to be a hike in prices. So people are saying, I might not have a job, but my house has gone up in value. Can I just go and get my house valued at the higher value? But I think you did allude to the fact that they will be looking at more, cash flows and stuff like that. So I think it might not, I think you answered that in the previous session, so it may not be there. So we have one more question. I think we have time for two more questions. One question to you, David. This question is, from one of our viewers on Facebook. She asks, what if you're a tenant if you're a landlord and the government is saying you can kind of get 50% of the rent from, if you're a commercial landlord, you can get 50% of rent from the government, and you can collect 25% from the tenant, but you have to eat 25%. So you got to give a 25% discount. So what if you're a landlord and you don't want to do that, right? Where does that leave you? Can you enforce the tenant to pay the 100%? Because if you actually go with the scheme of things, you do lose 25%. But if somebody said, I don't really want to lose 25%, I have a signed contract and I want to enforce this. And I know, David, this might not be right in your wheelhouse, but if you want to give it a go.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I personally, if I was the landlord and I own the property, and it's a commercial property, I would hold the tenant to the full amount of rent that they have agreed to in the contract. I wouldn't personally, unless you are okay with it, provide an abatement of any sort or relief. I would rather get into a discussion about deferring payments, maybe getting payments in a different fashion. I'm not too familiar about the government support that they're giving to commercial landlords. I'm not sure if it requires you to take a hit, but
it does.
Well, that's a really good question. If it does require you to take a hit, I think it's really an analysis you have to carry out and say, well, look, I can either demand full rent from my tenant, which I may or may not actually get, and I'll spend some time chasing it, perhaps in courts or otherwise. Again, if your tenant is bankrupt because they can't operate and they don't exist anymore, that might be a problem. And I don't know how courts are going to deal with these sort of disputes when they do, and if they end up in the courts. I don't know if judges may or may not be sympathetic to tenants, given that there was a pandemic. We don't know how that's going to be treated. On the other hand, if you feel that look, your choice is either get no rent or get 75%, because you're going to get 50% from the government and 25% from the tenant, that might be a little bit more amicable, and it works to some extent. I think it's an individual case-by-case basis, but I think the real question is, how are courts going to judge parties when and if these matters go before them in this pandemic world? I think that's a real open question.
Okay. Thanks, David.
Just to
And
Vijay, just to add to what David said. I mean, given the situation, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not a legal expert, but if the matter goes to court, so the court will also, I think, look at the option of if the landlord was given an option by the government to at least collect 75%. So rather than not to collect anything and go and litigate, that is one. So why did not they exercise that option? Yes, of course, they have a legal contract. Secondly, by taking that route of accepting 75, they are also ensuring they have a good relationship with the tenant, which will continue. And they are probably not sitting on empty space. And given the forecast, I mean, commercial real estate might be facing a challenge in terms of additional demand or continued pent-up demand.
we'll take two more quick questions. Thank you, Pramodji. So one question one about real estate stocks. So the Canadian real estate, GSPTTRE, I don't know if any of you follow that. That has not rebounded as the overall stock market. So anybody want to take that? Rob, have you been following, real estate index kind of stocks?
Unfortunately not. Sorry, I can't.
Anybody, Ramanji?
Yeah, so I will just give you a little bit idea because I follow a couple of REITs out over there, and I think they have got a major hit because majority of these REITs, like they're that's what is their basic kind of level of income which they play around. But the kind of predictions which are going there, and majority of the time I have seen like economists, they actually get panicked too soon. When something happens, like all of a sudden they start giving the statements like if I can remember last time 2008 and 2009 recession, they were saying that recession is not going to be over for another 10 years, whereas it was done in 6 months. So I think there is going to be a same level of recovery as it has hit onto us, and all those REITs and all those stocks of the real estate companies definitely going to trigger back very soon.
Okay. So thank you very much, Ramanji. I think that brings us to the end of most of the questions. So any of you have additional questions, please send us. I will allow everybody to have quick 10 seconds each. So, on your thing. So let's start with Ajay Shah first. Ajayji, you want to give quick 10 seconds on what your take is?
Well, I just want to say thank you, everybody, all panelists, including Ramanji and mortgage person and Toronto Estate Boards. They have done a wonderful job. I will just say, look, stay tight. Real estate market not going to go in a drain. It's just a matter of time. It's just pausing for a while. It will come back.
Okay. Ramanji?
Definitely, first of all, thanks to all the panelists as well as to all the viewers. Our government is coming up really, really wonderful in a wonderful way to support economy so that everything can be settled down as soon as it can be. And I think being real estate as one of the most prominent part of the economy, they have to support it. And I'm pretty sure there is going to be some incentive which will be coming on the way for first-time buyers. But again, as always, I am being very bullish to the market, and I'm pretty sure after 3 to 4 weeks, market is going to bounce back really very good.
Thank you, Raman. So, David, your quick 10 seconds.
I would just say that keep in mind how the world is going to change now. How are workplaces going to function? How are people going to be in there working together? Are there going to be new rules? How do we interact? And a lot of this will obviously impact the way the real estate market is going to be operating. So just keep an eye on those things. And then other than that, just take care of yourselves.
Thanks, David. Rob?
I agree with the general sentiment that the market is resilient. I do think it'll go down, but I do ultimately think it will go back up, especially in the GTA. It's a phenomenal place to live. And immigration and a strong economy, like we will get through this. These things are finite. So hang in there and stay safe.
Thanks, Rob. Pramodji, last thoughts, closing remarks from you, please.
Thank you, Vijay. I'm pretty happy to see the confidence and the excitement amongst our broker friends. I mean, and that exudes a lot of confidence in me also. I mean, of course, we all know market resilient, everybody agrees. So it is going to come back. It's just the temporary phase, but I think the confidence that I see with our brokerages, that definitely is very positive indication that things are okay, and they have a lot of experience behind them to make those kind of statements. And on behalf of the chamber and our board of directors, I would definitely like to thank all of you for taking the time and coming and sharing your opinion and views on this situation. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks. On that note, thank you everybody. For if you have anybody watching on Facebook, if you have any inquiries about today's webinar, want to become a member of the ICCC, and again, you don't need to be Indian to be a member of the ICCC. It is open to everybody. Please do write to ICCC at iccconline.org. And again, we spoke about the Small Business Assist Program. If you're a small business and then want some mentorship or help, and we have experts from within the ICCC that can help you. So give us a call, and we have a free 30-minute session that we can help you. Again, this is something that we continue every week. We have another session next week. It is not going to be banking, but sorry, it is going to be banking, 14 May, COVID-19 and banking. And same time, 4:30 p.m. Stay safe, everybody. And thank you very much for joining in. Have a nice evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.